So I want to introduce you to hydrogen sulfide SIBO, hydrogen sulfide large bowel dysbiosis. It's something that I see a lot with very treatment-resistant patients. So if you've kind of been going around and around and around, whether you know you have SIBO, whether you've got kind of gut dysfunction that won't shift, whether you get better and then you regress, whether therapies that work for everyone else doesn't work for you, listen up to this one, because if hydrogen sulfide is part of your root cause issue, these are the patients that I see, again, just going around and around and not getting the results they need to see, not improving. And then when we target hydrogen sulfide, everything starts to click and they start to see dramatic improvements quickly. So it's a bit of a minefield. I want to walk through kind of how I would discuss it with a patient when we're kind of trying to assess for and triage and kind of determine whether hydrogen sulfide is their issue, and then some of the typical therapies that I'll recommend. We're not going to get too in-depth on therapies. I'll save that for a future video. I just wanted to introduce you to this concept, and if you suspect that this might be you, if you're kind of relating to some of these case studies I'll share or some of these symptoms, then it's definitely something worth exploring for sure. So the big caveat here with hydrogen sulfide SIBO, it's the third SIBO presentation. It is the least explored. It's the one that we don't really know a whole lot about. And here in Australia, we can't actually test for hydrogen sulfide SIBO. Over in the States, they have the trio test. They've introduced the testing for this third notable gas. Small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. You've got hydrogen dominant SIBO, super common, see it all the time. Methane dominant SIBO. Very, very passionate about this condition. I see it kind of poorly understood and poorly treated in patients that come to see me. Tons and tons and tons of info on that on the channel, more than you could hope for. And then hydrogen sulfide SIBO is something that I have been suspecting in certain patients more and more, and I have been treating more and more of hydrogen sulfide SIBO, and I just had some insights that I wanted to share with you here. So again, here in Australia, we can't test for it on SIBO breath testing, so it is a kind of suspicion. We can never really confirm it 100%. Some of the lab testing that I'll use will look for hydrogen sulfide producers in the large bowel. The really big hitters there would be Desulfovibrio species, Bilophila species. A lot of the Enterobacteriaceae family produce hydrogen sulfide. It's very hit or miss, depends on what study you read, depends on what strain it is. Does E. coli produce it? Doesn't it? Does Klebsiella produce it? Doesn't it? It just depends on it depends on the strain, very much so, and depends on the study you read. But those are the most notable hydrogen sulfide species I'd be looking for. And then even things like certain Clostridium species. So C. difficile, it has been renamed to Clostridioides. It's not even in that genus anymore. It doesn't really matter. But, certain Clostridia species are very, very healthy and normal and kind of good for the gut. And then you've got some really nasty Clostridia species, not even just C. difficile, but very like Clostridia perfringens. Very, very nasty bug. Don't want it hanging around in big numbers. And some of them are hydrogen sulfide producers as well. So when we test the large bowel, we're looking at large bowel dysbiosis, and I'll use that to infer into small bowel dysbiosis, the SIBO, H2S, hydrogen sulfide SIBO. But that's one lab that I'll use. And then the other really big one would be a flatline SIBO breath test. But you don't always have to have a flatline, and this was just like a huge light bulb for me. Anytime I see a flatline SIBO breath test, I'm looking for and exploring hydrogen sulfide SIBO. That's like a given, for sure. Kind of everyone knows that. But I've also seen this mixed SIBO presentation where it's elevated methane, or it's hydrogen, or it's both. And there is also that hydrogen sulfide SIBO presentation as well that has never been properly addressed. We'll talk a little bit about how I approach that as well today. So classic symptoms of hydrogen sulfide SIBO, the best way that I've heard this explained is that a sulfur intolerant presentation has a very hot, irritable, inflamed presentation, whether that, it's always got gut issues almost every time, but beyond the gut issues, which would be things like bloating, distension, abdominal pain, pain that worsens after bowel movements. That's a really, really big kind of note for symptom of hydrogen sulfide SIBO. Could be constipation, could be diarrhea. So that's very hard to kind of pin down there. It's variable. And then often I'll see things like reflux or that upper digestive pain as well with hydrogen sulfide presentations. And then beyond the gut, I often see things like skin breakouts. I see things like dermatitis or eczema. Those are really big pieces, markers of inflammation. A redness of the skin is a really big presentation there. And then, inflamed gut, so leaky gut. If you're looking on testing and you see elevated calprotectin and leaky gut marker, and the bugs that drive that, the hydrogen sulfide bugs, you're looking at that as the root cause piece for those markers being so elevated. Really big kind of pearl here. You see it a lot in inflammatory bowel disease, and hydrogen sulfide production has been very, very well studied for driver or being kind of present in patients with IBD, inflammatory bowel disease. Now when I'm approaching hydrogen sulfide treatment, the two big approaches, and we don't have to work them both, one after the other, but the two big approaches that I will layer in would be treat the bugs. Pretty simple, right? Like if that was gonna work for a stuck patient, then likely they'd be better and we wouldn't be connecting. But these patients are kind of going around and around in circles and not seeing the benefit of typical antimicrobial therapies. So some more novel or kind of like notable hydrogen sulfide herbs that I'll use, they would be things like uva ursi. I use a boatload of uva ursi for hydrogen sulfide presentations. I've seen echoes around the internet saying that uva ursi is only a herb for the urinary tract. Like, don't believe it, haven't seen it, and I've seen clear evidence that uva ursi has been a miracle herb for gut dysfunction for the right person. You gotta pick the right herb for the right problem, for the right patient. There's a whole kind of algorithm that goes into choosing the right formula. And the other really big one there, which kind of dovetails a bit with that urinary tract piece, would be juniper. Those are two really big pieces that I see very helpful for hydrogen sulfide. And then the third herb that I'll use in big doses would be pomegranate husk. I find those guys to be very, very reliable for treating most hydrogen sulfide bugs. And then if you're looking to kind of build that out, which I always do, if you can get like a broader therapy, a broader formula, you get more improvements. Sticking with the essential oil herbs, thyme, oregano, those are really big ones. Cinnamon can really help there as well. And then clove. Clove can be hit or miss. Clove is very strong, and there are some sulfur intolerant patients that don't go well on clove. I've seen that a few times, so I'm a little bit kind of questionable on that. And then I will definitely dip into decent doses of oregano oil and decent doses of berberine when people get stuck on that journey and kind of haven't seen results there. Now, one interesting piece when we're talking about hydrogen sulfide SIBO and it's bacterially mediated, like a bacterial overgrowth or imbalance or infection is driving that gut dysfunction, then the one caveat, not a contraindication, but something that I'm very, very cautious around and I'm kind of holding back on and I'm not leaning in on and I'm not recommending and I'm kind of looking at past treatments where they've gone wrong would be bitters and cholagogues, choleretics, anything, even amino acids, right? Like taurine, I mean, obviously that's sulfur, so you got to stay away from that. But, you know, even these amino acids, you know, choline that stimulate bile flow and thin bile, anything that is going to improve bile flow into the small bowel may, possibly, could, likely, will trigger a hydrogen sulfide flare, right? And the big piece there is a lot of those sulfur reducing bacteria are bile acid resistant. You see a bloom in SRBs, again, hydrogen sulfide SIBO, when your bile is kind of, you know, when you're pushing bile, right? That's the headline, that's the pearl there for sure. And I had one case study. Treated her for SIBO. She came in, it was a whole mess. She'd been through hydrogen dominant SIBO with a past prachi, kind of got on top of that. I kicked over to methane SIBO. She was constipated, she was bloated, you know, it was a messy case. Got some really big improvements quickly with liquid herbal medicine. That is really the standout piece for a lot of people that are stuck. Herbal tinctures can really kind of crack a case wide open and get that movement happening quickly. A lot of people haven't worked with them either, so it's pretty notable. And then she was doing really well, stopped seeing her, she went off, she was living her life, she was traveling overseas, third world country, and got, you know, a food poisoning event. Came back and a local naturopath, she just needed quick results because she was having like acute kind of food poisoning symptoms and didn't want to regress into, you know, the chronic digestive presentation. And so saw a local naturopath. And this local naturopath recommended strong herbal bitters, and it just flared her SIBO symptoms like crazy. She got bloated, she got gassy, she got bowel movement changes, abdominal pain. And when we connected, she reached out and she was like, look, I need some support quickly. First thing, pull those herbal bitters, stop them immediately, and tell me how much better you feel. And literally within a day or two, I'm feeling so much better. You know, I'm good, right? No problem. And so that, to me, not everyone, but that is just another confirmation that we have to be cautious around herbs that stimulate bile flow in certain bacterial imbalances. On the flip side, there's a whole bunch of cases where we need more bile, but it's just a little bit of a caveat. And the other really big one, insight, pearl, would be people who have intolerances to ox bile. And so if they supplement with ox bile and it flares their digestive symptoms, it could be a hydrogen SIBO, hydrogen sulfide SIBO presentation. So there's a lot there. That's on the herbal side of things. Butyrate or butyrate kind of supporting prebiotic fibers. I love partially hydrolyzed guar gum. I like acacia fiber. Those are my two favorite ones. We can kind of build that out if the gut is more tolerant, and likely it's not. I like to keep my prebiotics low FODMAP and, you know, individual or, you know, simplistic, so that we can track tolerance. That's huge. To tolerate it for it to get you better. Butyrate, something that I will jump on directly for a lot of you know, severe presentations where they just need some stability. I've seen butyrate really move the needle in a few case studies, which I'll share in a future video with hydrogen sulfide presentations, and then probiotics as well. And, you know, to me, it's kind of a mixed bag. I'll probably lean a little bit heavier on spore-based probiotics for hydrogen sulfide SIBO. You know, the bacillus strains I've found quite helpful, and I'll kind of mix and match them depending on the presentation. If they're constipated, it'll be a different bacillus kind of strain and species. If it's more of like an antimicrobial aspect, I'll use something like megaspore or kind of, you know, megaspore adjacent. They're tricky to work with. They can be reactive, so you just have to be a bit careful on introducing them. Make sure they're tolerated before you go full dose into them for a course. So far, that's all pretty basic stuff, and you're probably looking at your watch being like, when's it going to get to something relevant? Maybe I'll skip on to a different video. But the big piece here is that if you do not see benefit with treating the bugs, which a lot of these patients have that I've worked with, and they're going around in circles, the other really big piece there, maybe not so much going around in circles, I've seen it a handful of times. You test, you see an extremely elevated hydrogen sulfide producing bacteria on the stool test. You treat it, you resolve the bug, you retest, and another hydrogen sulfide SIBO bug has just popped out of nowhere. Like, where is this coming from? Nothing's changed. Why would that pop up? I would start to be suspecting, and I know this is going to sound absolutely nuts, becoming a little bit more popular. It's kind of coming into cultural awareness, but I would be starting to suspect a sulfur deficiency. And this is the conversation that I have with patients. They're scratching their heads saying, what are you talking about? I do not tolerate sulfur. How could all of these issues be from a lack of sulfur, from a sulfur deficiency? And it's definitely more complicated. I would be looking into sulfur metabolism, your ability to break down and to process sulfur coming in your diet into that end product through the transsulfuration pathway called sulfate, right? And you might know of sulfate from something like Epsom salts. That's magnesium sulfate, right? When you bathe in Epsom salts, you're basically bathing in sulfate. Right? And that's the end of the pathway. It has to go through a whole big long journey to get to sulfate. And along the way, things can get broken down. Everyone's very focused on the SUOX enzyme, the sulfite oxidase enzyme. That can get kind of impaired and dysregulated and not function properly. And then you get buildup of these intermediary kind of sulfur kind of metabolism pieces, things like sulfite. Again, it's kind of not acronym soup, but it gets a little bit messy. And sulfite is extremely toxic to the body. And so bugs can kind of hijack that and turn it into hydrogen sulfide. So there's a whole big kind of journey here that a bunch of researchers have been going on. Stephanie Seneff is someone that I would look into if you're kind of suspecting this might be you. And this depletion of sulfate can lead to this like adaptive, quasi like maladaptive dysbiosis in the gut, because these bugs are trying to keep sulfur in the mix so that sulfur can do what it's supposed to do. But the problem with that presentation, right, they turn it into a gas, and then the hydrogen sulfide just diffuses across cell membranes and kind of goes where it needs to go. The problem with that process is excessive amounts of hydrogen sulfide is not good for your body, right? It breaks down your gut wall, it's very pro-inflammatory. Small amounts are great, gaseous neurotransmitter, it has a physiological function, but an excessive amount is going to lead to all of these symptoms that you might be dealing with if it is a hydrogen sulfide presentation. So how do we tackle sulfur metabolism issues leading to dysbiosis? I would still front run, I would still use herbal antimicrobials initially, and I would look for benefit with that approach. And then the second piece that I would run if and when necessary, if a patient comes back and they're like, look, I'm still unwell, or it hasn't got me better, or I'm 50% better, but I've plateaued and I'm not getting that next leg, then I would start to look to replete sulfur. That's tricky. We're going to talk about that. And then the second piece is I would start to work these enzymes and start to improve these enzymes. So if we're focusing on the SUOX enzyme, molybdenum's a really big piece. It can be tricky to work with, but it can help power that SUOX enzyme and convert sulfite, think toxic, to sulfate, think powering all of these enzymes and doing good things, helping detox things. You need sulfate. So molybdenum there helps work that enzyme, it's a cofactor. And then this is something that I've been using a lot in the past 6 to 12 months, MSM, and it's basically just sulfur as a supplement. And so you might say, look, I eat sulfur in my diet and it makes me feel terrible. I even tried MSM and it made me feel really terrible. If you've trialed MSM and it's made you feel terrible, still work those antimicrobials. That's what I would recommend to my, my patients. And then I just drip dose or micro dose that MSM in. And for the majority of patients, they start it, they feel terrible. It flares all their symptoms to 10 out of 10. They cut back, symptoms improve. And then as they slowly kind of charge up that sulfur in their system, their symptoms improve, they stabilize. And then as they go up on the MSM dose, and we can go to high doses, it's a very safe supplement. As they get to those higher doses, a lot of those strong hydrogen sulfide SIBO symptoms improve dramatically. So that's most patients. Most patients can get through that MSM protocol with kind of a few stops and starts and bumps along the way for most of them. Most of them kind of want to give up initially, and then once they get over about that teaspoon dose, everything starts to kind of plateau and then symptoms start to drop off. But then there's always maybe 1 out of 10 sulfur intolerant patients that just can't do MSM, and it will just flare their symptoms up and they just can't get over that hurdle. So there we say, look, pause it. We might come back to different kind of sulfur products or sulfur supplements to see if we can kind of charge up that pathway from a different angle, or we might revisit the bacterial dysbiosis piece from another angle as well. But for the vast majority of people, if you've gone through the antimicrobials and you suspect you have hydrogen sulfide SIBO and you're not getting better, then exploring sulfur metabolism is the key that unlocks a lot of these chronically unwell and treatment-resistant patients in a big way. One thing that I did forget to mention there is that Epsom salt baths are a good way to start, because when you're soaking in an Epsom salt bath, you're just getting transdermal, you're getting the sulfate through the skin. And so instead of going through the gut, you get it in through the skin. Doesn't tend to flare up your digestive symptoms, and you can kind of start that process of repleting your sulfur without flaring up your digestive symptoms, just to start with. Personally and clinically, I haven't seen Epsom salt baths to be a cure for most people, but it's that good little wedge into improving sulfur metabolism that then we can then layer in some of the stronger oral sulfur therapies as you improve. So hopefully that was helpful. That was a bit of like a stream of consciousness hydrogen sulfide dump on you. It's the conversation that I have with a lot of my sulfur intolerant patients, where they kind of get stuck and they're looking for answers, and we start to explore these different kind of avenues. I have seen miracles in repleting sulfur. I've also seen a few patients flare on it and not be able to tolerate it. I've seen miracles with molybdenum. I've also seen people not tolerate it or not see benefit with it. And it's very much using the trial, using the therapies as the test to confirm that we're on the right track as well. So again, hope that was helpful. If you liked it, comment, subscribe. That helps me grow the channel. And if you are looking for help with chronic digestive health issues, you live in Australia or New Zealand, then there will be a booking link in the description below.